we are excited to welcome Steve Elldred from SkinCity. SkinCity are a skincare e-commerce retailer, and they've got about 120 people across the UK and the Nordics. And I think it's fair to say that personalisation, which is what we're going to be talking about today from the retailer's point of view, is at the very heart and centre of SkinCity. So, pleasure to have you on the show, Steve. Welcome.
Good morning.
No, great to have you. Would you be able to start by maybe filling in some more detail, a bit more colour on SkinCity, who you are and what the brand's all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So SkinCity, we are, as you say, we're a skincare retailer, predominantly in cosmeceuticals. Cosmeceuticals are a type of skincare somewhere in between what you can buy on high street and what has to be pharmaceutical and prescribed.
Yeah.
So there's an area there which sits in and around treatments such as Botox, fillers and so on, but it also sits around a lot of the conditions, so hyperpigmentation, people have rosacea and all sorts of skin conditions. So we have two sort of areas we play in, one of which is more of the beauty side and the skincare side, the other which is very much more conditional led. So quite interesting again when it comes to personalisation, how we deal with those two.
Yeah, of course. And how long have you been in the e-commerce game yourself, Steve? Give us a bit about you.
So I've had about 15 years in this arena, e-commerce arena. SkinCity itself, obviously, has only been in the UK for exactly a year now this month. But the UK company itself has been around for just short of 10 years. A year ago, SkinCity entered the UK and started the UK business by way of acquisition. So we've had the last year is quite a significant journey of rebranding and so on, and upping our game in that sense. So to give some context, is say we've got over 100 to 120 staff now across the UK and Nordics. Between 10 and 15% of those are based in the UK, the rest being in the Nordics. And it's an interesting journey so far.
Yeah, sounds it, and I'd love to dig in a little bit. So cosmeceuticals. Now they must be pretty difficult to sell online, right? I mean, in terms of it, I assume it's very tailored. You need to be personalised. How are you kind of dealing with what for you, I guess, is a necessity to personalise?
Exactly right. So it's a bit of a minefield when you are a consumer and you're faced with. I mean, we alone sell over 1,000 SKUs, so you're faced with that many things and to contend with, especially when it's a condition you might be trying to treat and so on. Trying to personalise things and trying to hone down people's attention span sometimes into a single selection of products is very difficult. So that's where we use both to start with. We use personalisation and technology to help us, and that follows on with one-to-one touch points with our staff. To give you context of that, out of the 120 staff, I think around 30 or 40 are all skincare trained. So one of our biggest USPs is that we take our customers by the hand, one-to-one, as soon as possible. But before that happens, obviously we have to rely on technology to help us get to that point.
Okay, so you're actually front-loading the tech in terms of personalisation. We'll talk about that in a sec. Yeah. But then on the back end, you're actually giving a one-to-one experience with a trained professional.
Absolutely.
So you're really personal. You're top
personal, yes, absolutely.
Capital P personal. So Steve, you've obviously doing a lot with personalisation. It'd be great if you could give us sort of a bit of a walkthrough as to, not necessarily just at SkinCity, or I know you've not been at SkinCity for 15 years, but give us a walkthrough of how that journey of personalisation has gone for you. How's that sort of started and how's it evolved over time?
Absolutely. So 10 years ago it would have looked very different to us today. Certainly, even in the last 5 years, it would look very, very different. Where we would have been looking at very much homebrew code to push products in front of people. Very much hit and hope approach. No kind of even thoughts of AI or anything intelligent about it really. Using very, very basic algorithms that were formulated that were sort of developed by ourselves or in-house teams. Winding that right back to today, we've now got things like dynamic content, not just product dynamic content based on segmentation, based on behaviour, based on purchase patterns and so on that we draw in. So it goes far beyond just throwing the appropriate product on screen at the right time. There's all sorts of things we then wrap around that throughout the user's journey.
Okay. And would you, if so, for people listening, if they're maybe not as far on as you are in the personalisation journey, where would you, if you were starting again today, where would you sort of kick off? Would you go all guns blazing? Would you have a more piecemeal approach? Like, what would be your sort of, I guess, iterations from starting again, day dot, personalisation wise?
So if it starts again, I think you'd probably have to. I think it's very difficult to start again. I think people who are starting doing things like this and bringing technology like this now have a hard task, because there's quite a lot of people who have matured their approach and their strategies. So I think if I were to come at it again, I'd probably look at some consultancy or some help from fellow retailers to get to an all guns blazing point as fast as possible.
Okay.
I think tiptoeing into it now, you're already on your back foot. I don't think there's time to be able to do that.
And so let's hope that then people listening are not tiptoeing into it now by that, and maybe they are more advanced. What are the sort of, I guess, some of the dials that you've looked at based on your demographic that maybe you're able to share in terms of things that have perhaps worked well? I know one of the things we were talking about before the show was you have obviously specific users sometimes coming in for a specific brand, and so there's often some challenges about, well, do we try and cross-promote and actually maybe lose, irritate them to the point where we lose the initial sale they're looking for? Like, how do we manage, I guess, the 1,000 SKUs and delivering that? Maybe we could talk around that then for the more advanced retailers.
Yes, absolutely. So, as you say, a lot of our customers are very brand-centric, and we don't want to annoy them by putting too many other flashy things around them. So I think what I would look at now, and what we do look at now, is making sure that those segments are right. That if we know someone is a die-hard fan of brand X, then we tailor them that way to make sure that their journey, we keep them within that brand, or we make sure things are very much complementary to the brand they're using. We also then have the data to know that someone isn't necessarily a die-hard fan, and therefore we can be a little bit more lavish with our approach.
Okay, cool. And so in terms of, I guess, that journey, I guess one of the things that you're highlighting, if I'm understanding correctly for the people listening, is the fact that through these journeys you have to be very specific about making the personalisation relevant to what the buyer wants to do, rather than maybe necessarily your objectives, which is going to be drive up your basket value every time.
Yeah, that would be nice. Absolutely. So we've got, I think that is the challenge. We have got that challenge constantly. But if we dial it back to what we stand for as a business, and that is one-to-one advice, and that is making sure that people are getting the right products for their condition or for their needs, we have to make sure we put them first. So yes, we want to be pushing up all of those metrics, of course we do, but what we also want to do is make sure is retention. If people have a good experience and have a nice experience, a smooth experience, aren't sold to constantly, then they will come back. And we find that through our process and through the way we approach the market with all our skin therapists and the one-to-one. We try and echo that in the technology we use. We could turn all of those dials up, we could turn all those dials up to 11, and that might give some short-term gains, but it's not going to give us that long-term retention, because we're just going to be hitting people over the head. We find that across all of our channels, and the approach and the strategy we have is to be very much on their side of the fence, rather than just trying to be the retailer that's trying to shift the product.
Yeah.
We were very much about the being diligent in our approach.
Amazing. And I think it's great to hear. I think it's one of the overarching themes of all the episodes we've probably done is put the customer first.
Yeah,
good mistake. But I think it's so true. With any of these tools, and for those listening, that there is that fine line of what's the short term, dial up to 11, spam the crap out of them, and maybe we see a bit of an uptick. But then long term, what's that tail effect of I'm sick of it looking like a banner ad site.
We've all seen it with retargeting. You go onto every website, you've gone to look one pair of trainers, and all of a sudden there's a pair of trainers everywhere.
Yeah.
And you can do the same, it's more subtle, but you can do the same with personalisation. If all of a sudden they're being pushed the same message, they'll get sick of it very quickly. People are very sensitive to these things, and that's where I think some of the mistakes people make are certainly over-optimizing and trying to target a little too heavily. You've got to target, the way you should really be targeting things like this is actually targeting to try and pull things away. Like we said, if someone's brand-centric, try and pull this away from them. You use the segmentation to do that. Don't use it to try and hit them over the head with.
That's a really great point. I just want to make sure that everyone captures that, because I think it's invaluable. Is sometimes personalisation is about doing less.
Yeah, absolutely.
And being more specific, rather than personalisation being hey, buy all this stuff because a million other people have.
Yeah, and you've got the flip side to that.
Yeah.
You've got the flip side with acquisition channels. So where you don't know where that person is, very much a grey area. Obviously, they've come in through, say, I don't know, Google Shopping, for example, and they've clicked on a product that looks a little bit like what they wanted. It's probably the right brand, but they clicked on it because maybe it had a little promotion link on it or something. They come through to our website, or a website. And what you'll find is on an acquisition channel like Google Shopping, people just bounce straight back out because they have no other products to really compare it to. So it wasn't quite the right product, they go back to Google and maybe they pick another retailer. But what we do is we can then show those other products on our site. So we can say, well, they clicked on this product, but because specifically they come from that channel, we'll show a different type of personalization for them. We'll show them and recommend, a subset of products that are very much related to that product. Therefore, they don't go back to Google, they don't click on a competitor site, and they stay within our site and hopefully enjoy the journey and the benefits that we know we can offer them. So that's the flip side of it. But like you say, it's making sure that we don't confuse those. The people who we know what they want, we play nice with those, but the people who don't, we can be a bit more lavish.
Okay, so if I was to, I guess, try and summarise that for kind of the action points as you've kind of described there, it sounds like what you're really saying is if you already have existing customer data, those journeys should be hyper relevant and hyper focused, hyper targeted, and actually a lot of the personalization work in those journeys where you've got the data is taking stuff away.
Yeah, soft touch, yeah.
And focusing their minds on what they want to be focused on. But if you're, meeting new customer A, B, or C, then in that case you need to be smarter about using historic data. Where do you draw those insights from to say, okay, well, if someone comes for this product on Google Shopping and we're going to show you this suite, well, where's that insight drawn from? Is that by a channel basis or is that by a product basis? What's your...
Mostly by product basis. Obviously, we know they come from a certain channel, we know they click on a certain product, so obviously we can draw loads of assumptions from that. We might even have a little bit of data on them if they've been to our site before, but let's say we haven't got any data, then we'll do broad brush. Based on that, hopefully we'll get a few clicks, and as soon as we get a few clicks, obviously that starts getting things moving as far as personalization, because as soon as those clicks happen, if they click on a product that is a certain brand, or they click on two products that are in a certain category, our assumptions become a lot more accurate. So they go from this grey area of we don't know who they are or what they want, very quickly to becoming something, or a person that's segmented. We can be a lot more targeted. And if we're more targeted, we can then be more relevant. And if we're more relevant, they have a nicer experience because they're seeing things that they can adhere to in that sense.
Yeah, of course. So the more they engage with your, I guess, machine, if it's working well, then the better that machine works, and therefore the better their experience is at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and those first points we then pull through, hopefully, to get them on a one-to-one basis with a therapist, whether that be over the phone, email, chat. We're bringing all sorts of technology over this year to make that the engagement on one-to-ones even closer. But this front-end stuff, if we get this right, we know more people then engage with us on a one-to-one. We know if more people engage on a one-to-one, the retention is much better, and it's a much better environment for them to be buying products in. They get better advice, they get to see better results.
Do you think that there's a theme in the industry from an e-com retailer's perspective where the goalposts have moved from conversion to long-term customer experience, retention, and so forth? Do you think those goalposts have started to shift?
Yeah, massively. I think people are needing to do things. You've got obviously the big beasts like Amazon shipping boxes, tons of them constantly, but they could never compete in certain areas, and it's those areas, whether it be one-to-one or just the whole value proposition, that I think other independent retailers are having to push. They're having to push hard on those, and I think also the consumer wants that as well. They know that any minute of the day they could hit a button, buy anything from any of the big faceless retailers. That's not a problem at all. But where they're not going to get the service is exactly from those places. And when it comes to skincare, that's where people make a lot of mistakes. And it is unfortunate when you hear our therapists talking to customers who have bought products maybe without the right experienced therapist or any kind of information or recommendation at all, and they end up obviously using the wrong products, and that can actually be quite a serious thing, especially if trying to treat a condition, and then it's making it worse. That's not a good position for anyone to be in.
No, 100% not. Okay, that's really interesting. I think, would you maybe say, taking that, I guess, viewpoint from your perspective, which is, I guess really you could say it's like a brand-led, experience-led proposition more than necessarily, you've got the products obviously to back it up, but it's about how do you engage with those products is where you're really coming from, it, fair to say?
Absolutely.
Cool. So with that in mind, like, what are the goals and objectives from your perspective in terms of the personalisation journey and roadmap? Like, what are you looking to drive forwards, perhaps? What are the things that you're still looking to make improvements with? It sounds like you've sort of got all the bells and all the whistles. So what's, I guess, next for you in terms of your journey?
I think for us it's to leverage those segments, obviously very much product-led segments, to then push more dynamic content. Obviously, and then pushing that across more of our channels. So we already push dynamic content and product recommendations into all of our channels, and that's one of the beauties of this technology, is that we can layer on top of everything we're doing. But I think we can do a lot more. I think when it comes to actually the wider experience of either visiting our site or engaging with us, I think there's a lot more we can do to make it more, make it feel more like the one-to-one they're eventually going to have. And try and use dynamic content to make that happen.
Yeah, because it's quite, one of the things I guess that you must struggle with in some ways is the inherent lack of scalability in the human models. That's like your UVP, and you don't want to lose that, but also until I guess you get someone to have that conversation, someone never really appreciates it.
Exactly.
So in terms of that dynamic content, is there anything you're doing that you think might be interesting to share around trying to bring that humanity kind of into that dynamic content, or trying to take those experts and leverage them into that dynamic content in some fashion? Is that sort of what you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's something that we're currently talking about, is how can we bring that one-to-one experience onto our site more. One of the conversations we've had very recently is to talk about how relatable we can be. Now, when someone's on the phone to one of our therapists, they can be instantly relatable. They can talk about their skin types, or they've got similar skin types, or I've got a friend that's got a similar skin type to you, and they can start relating straight away. When on the website, we have no idea, so we have to make a lot of, again, assumptions. But if we have some data about that person, so if they've constantly been clicking on products or around areas, or products maybe for a certain skin type or condition, then we can maybe use content around that. Some of our, obviously lots of blog posts and lots of content and video content and so on. We can maybe position some of that around those products to make sure that they feel like they're relating to us a bit closer. So again, it's trying to use that data and our content, so not just product recommendations, because that's just the selling part, but actually our content as well, to make them feel more relatable.
Okay, cool. Are you going to the extent of, for example, taking members of your team and putting them, say, on video and doing it? Is that sort of the kind of...
Absolutely, yeah. Our therapist phoned only yesterday that they shoot videos all the time. We don't overproduce. We don't go like that. It's very much
organic.
Just get it out there. It's about getting that advice and getting that content out there. But yeah, absolutely, we push them to the forefront. You'll notice that when you go to our website, I don't think there's one page on the site that you won't find a picture of one of our skin therapists. We don't use stock shots or models in that sense. They're all our own staff.
Problem is they've all got such nice skin that it's hard to believe.
They all seem to use the right products.
Yeah, exactly. The proof's in the pudding. Okay, cool. You said earlier, I just want to kind of jump back to kind of how to differentiate, which I think we're still in the realms of, with you're using your staff to kind of produce content. So I guess for people listening, is there opportunities for you and your team to bring the experience that someone has post or later on in their journey and kind of move that in some way up the funnel, I guess, is really what you're thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy, and that's the tough bit. That is the tough bit. That is where we use social. We use specifically at the moment Instagram obviously is the big one, to try and bring that experience forward. We have an online skin test on our site, so our customers and prospective customers can fill in either a small or a large amount of detail depending on which test they choose. They can upload a photo, they can put comments on there, and they can engage with our therapists that way by effectively submitting all of that data. The therapist then can analyse that data and go back to them with a written effective consultation.
Nice.
And off the back of that, they can arrange a one-to-one call, they can follow up, and they know that reply that they've had is not generated, there's no technology there, that is a human replying to a specific set of criteria that the customer's put in. So when they have the one-to-one call, they can actually ask and speak to that same therapist who gave them that initial recommendation. Again, difficult to scale, but it works very, very well because that is effectively us bringing that one-to-one, that conversation, try and bring that further forward. It'll make it easier for people to start that as well. Not everyone's comfortable picking up the phone and talking about their skin conditions, so there's lots of things where you have to make it sort of drop some of the barriers a little bit. Chat's been a really good one for that as well. We find that as soon as our chat is live and on, we find that phone calls drop, which is great. It makes us slightly more efficient as a business, but it also means that I think customers can sometimes want to start those conversations where it is a little bit personal sometimes. They can start them a little bit more anonymously.
Yes, yeah, and obviously it's a great tool for, I think, those more touchy conversations, and also, I mean, it fits, I think, the whole mantra what you're sort of, I guess, talking about, which is you're really front-loading a huge amount of value, right? Like you're giving a lot away before someone's clicked buy.
Yeah.
But I think that's in tune with kind of where the market's moving and where the customers want things. They're sick of having to give stuff up before they get something, and so now the balance of power is very much shifting back the other way. And it's really interesting, Steve, to hear how you're actually front loading that value to such an extent, and then I guess banking on the retention.
Absolutely.
Right, because I don't know what your cost of converting someone is. I'm not going to ask you that, but I can imagine there's quite a lot involved. It sounds like there's a lot potentially involved just to get that first order. Yeah. So really, you're then banking on that whole experience, plus product range, plus staff, plus everything else you're doing, and then your ongoing marketing is where you're looking, I assume, for the long-term payoff.
Absolutely, and then it's also doesn't just make us different to our competitors, it makes us better for our customers. It makes us a better experience. And again, when it comes down to something that's personal and skincare, it has to be done this way. There's too many. It's a minefield out there otherwise.
So you're doing a hell of a lot in terms of personalisation, front loading the value, consultations, the one-to-one appointments. There's a lot in the business that you're doing in terms of personalisation. But I guess from your perspective in the market, why is personalisation now becoming such a battleground? You said before basically that if I'm a retailer starting now, I'm kind of dead in the water. So it's obviously something that's now pretty ubiquitous, but what is that sort of need about it? What's that need for the investment in those sort of acquisition channels or continuing to try and push that personalisation forwards? Where's that sort of being driven from, would you say?
Certainly around the skincare space, I think it's such a competitive space, becoming even more competitive, but it's growing really, really quickly as well. And that gives that dynamic of it being, quite, let's say, difficult to navigate at points, to make sure you are giving the customers what they need. As far as where we see the huge benefit is being able to layer across all the channels.
Okay.
And I think when it comes to personalisation, one of the things our customers really do want to know and hear about are the products that mean something to them. It's so varied. So, a condition or a requirement that one person has it can be so different to the next person. We have to leverage data. We have to use that data to make sure we are saying the right things to the right people, showing the right products to the right people. If we don't do that, it's simply apples and pears. We're showing someone very quick. It could be showing something to someone that's completely wrong. Or worst case scenario, it's something that actually could make their condition worse or doesn't give them the effect. When it comes from a beauty point of view, it doesn't give them the effect they want. Cosmetics are another one. If you look at skin tones and colours, it's a minefield to make sure that people are buying products, for testers and so on. Buying cosmetics online is an inherently difficult process, and that's again where I think personalisation and AI is going to start coming on board over the next few years quite heavily. At the moment, retailers are doing a lot. I know the one specific retailer, when they send out one shade of a cosmetic product, they actually send the two either side shades as well as samples, so that the customer can try those samples first, and if they're not quite right, then send the main product back, once it's unopened, unused, and it doesn't cost the retailer the money for the return. So lots of interesting things going on there, but I do think that technology will start to push the boundaries a little bit on that. It's quite basic at the moment with people taking pictures of themselves and sending in effectively selfies, but I think where technology is really going to leap, and this is obviously an extension of AI and personalisation, will be when it comes to skin tones and cosmetic matching.
It's like facial recognition type stuff. Okay, cool. Yeah. Really excited. I want to talk about the future in a sec, and that sounds very futuristic. So that's good. But you talked about that kind of moving battle. We talked about that quite a lot. The other thing, I guess, within that is you touched on earlier the dynamic content. You talked about changing, obviously, the user's journey. But what about the other channels that you're looking at? So one of the things we've talked about a lot in these areas is email. So as a consumer, I know emails for me have become sort of a bit of a graveyard in terms of newsletters and so on and so forth. How are you using email, I guess, and what are you finding still works and what are you finding maybe is kind of difficult to get the message out?
It's really interesting, actually. We've done some analysis recently on certain subject lines, which seems like an old school thing to do, but it's still one that we find valuable, and it's one where it's not necessarily big promotions and launches that are getting all the engagement. They might be getting the revenue, but they're not getting the engagement. Okay. It's content. It's certainly in our arena when we put good, engaging content out there, or relevant content, we get the better returns as far as people coming to that in the longer term engagement. And we can see that through our stats. One thing I'd say with that is what we're looking to do more of on the email side is use the segments that we're gaining from personalization tool to then maybe change that content around. So if we've got data on someone and they haven't got rosacea, they have no interest in rosacea whatsoever, why are we pushing content about rosacea? So again, it's taking the product side away from it, but using the product data to influence our content push. So that person might just be looking for, I don't know, a beauty regime. So they don't have a specific skin condition at all. So we know that based on the products they're looking at, so let's push the content towards them, those more relevant. But holding back on the products, pushing the content.
Got it, okay. And for you, what because you said valuable content, which I think is a really important point, what have you found to be, as defined by your customers, valuable types of content in terms of maybe themes or formats, or what kind of things have you said, hey, this has gone really well?
So it's difficult to pick one really. Our demographic's quite wide, and I think depending on who is engaging with us will depend on what type of content they like. Obviously, video is massive, and that's doing really, really well. But we also have a magazine called Skin Health Magazine. It's obviously separate to the company. It's not there to sell products. They're purely informational. And Skin Health Magazine goes into every order that goes out the door as well. So we have a signature wrapping process for every order where you get samples, you get a makeup bag, you get a little Kakeshi doll, which is another little spin. Really nice story. It's a symbol of gratitude. Again, it's all that part of the experience. But you also get the Skin Health Magazine. So we go from short snippets on Instagram, again, probably a certain demographic, using those through to an actual folded magazine in every order. And it's difficult to say if anything's winning out over anything else, really. I think certain channels are starting to drop away. Certainly social, you see Facebook starting to drop away a little bit, as it has been doing over the last few years, obviously with the rise of Instagram. You see even within Google, there's big movements time and time again between not just stuff coming in as far as shopping versus maybe search, or ads versus organic, but again, device type, again, it is changing all the time. It's the age-old mobile, the rise of mobile, but it is happening, and for us, the needle's well across half, so that's good.
Okay, and I just wanted to ask quickly about, because you said you've got your Instagram going, you've got social media marketing, you've got email marketing, you're sending the doll, you've got the makeup bags, you've got the magazines, you're really firing on all cylinders. You're not letting anything not get done, so which is great. But one of the things I think sometimes people get hung up on in e-commerce is attribution. Mm-hmm. And someone in the organisation seems to always want to know how many pounds and pence sir or madam, did that particular thing that you did do, how much did it give us back?
Yeah.
What's your view on that? Because it must be bloody hard for you to justify on that basis something like a magazine. So how do you sleep at night with with the ability to do that? Because I think it's a great idea, and I think it's the direction of travel we should be going. But what's your view on it?
So, attribution is one of the toughest things to work out when it comes to, and we're mostly online. We are fully online in that sense. We have a clinic, but all our sales are online, and it's still difficult. If we had bricks and mortar as well, it'd be even harder. Now, attribution is something that with a magazine we work on very, very loosely, and we have to work on that basis. But what we know from our customers directly is how valuable that magazine is. The other reason that the magazine is something that is so precious to us is because none of our competitors offer that. They're not putting that level of content out there, which is valuable. It's something where I think when it comes to beauty and skincare, there's so much going on. It's such a fast-paced, such a fast-growing area that there's so much information the consumers need to have to be able to make a decision or to be updated on the latest trends or products or ingredients and so on. And we have articles in there about the environmental factors as well. There's also, microbeads is an old thing, but it's keeping our customers up to date with what's going on around them. So it's not just articles about a specific product. It's about lifestyle. It's about health. It's about fitness. It's about the environment. But the centre message is skincare. There's one of our suppliers is a doctor, and he talks about obviously the skin being the biggest organ on the body. If you look after your skin, then the rest of your body's going to be okay. So I kind of subscribe to that a little bit as well. But I think it's a really good point. I think if we can make sure we're approaching our customers in a more of a holistic way through the magazine, that gives them a sort of broader amount of content to consume, but also gives them the bigger picture of why you should be looking after your skin as a whole.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me when you were talking through the proposition and why the magazine is so valuable, as you said, one of the reasons it's so valuable is because no one else is doing it. And I just had this vision of other boardrooms doing in similar industries where someone said, we should do a magazine. They went, how are we going to prove the ROI of that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think in some instances, what's been really nice, I think, about some of the thread that you've pulled on through this whole conversation is it's been a thread of do what you think is going to be best for the customer, and good stuff will happen. Exactly. And as long as you can get that feeling that some of your customers bring it up to you, or some of your customers mention it to you, then you can get comfortable with the idea that probably there's a whole lot of other people who feel the same way.
Exactly. And
net is something else no one's doing. So I guess for people listening, one of the things that they can maybe take away from this is, what are the underserviced avenues, perhaps? What are the things that their competitors are not touching or are not doing that would add a lot of value to produce, or would add a lot of value to the customer to produce, that they could then craft a niche for? And you might not be able to put it on a GA dashboard, but that doesn't mean it's about
exactly. And it's usually those things where someone will mention something or suggest something, and if the response is, that's going to be too difficult to do, or we haven't got enough people to do that, or that's going to be too expensive to do, they're probably the reasons you should be doing it. They're the same reason as someone else as well.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, if it feels uncomfortable, it's probably the right thing to do.
It's worth looking at harder. Yeah.
Cool. Love it. Okay, let's talk future now. So we talked about Terminator AR, facial recognition. Where's John Connor? But what does the future hold when it comes to personalisation?
So obviously that's a big one when it comes to personalisation. I think when it comes to
the AR, the VR, is that specifically?
Exactly. It's bringing that in-clinic approach. I think, and that's where personalisation, and this is going leaps and leaps away from where we are now, but that's where it can really, I think, leverage its power. I would also say I think there's enough technology out there right now for it to be a lot better. I think the short-term future for personalisation is actually just better implementation, better use of it. you see lots of websites that obviously do have some kind of mechanic behind there to try and leverage, I don't know, whether it be dynamic content or personalized recommendations for products, but they've not, or the execution and implementation of it has either been sparse, therefore that they're not really getting the traction they need to or getting the data they need to, or it's been poor. So again, it's not relatable for the customer because they're seeing irrelevant products. I think the immediate future for this area would be better adoption. Again, you see some retailers not using any technology, and I think that's a massive missed opportunity because there are all sorts of areas where this can be leveraged, where it is subtle, and it needs to be subtle. I mean, knowing it, to use Amazon as a great example, you're doing one product and there's 100 products listed underneath. That's way down the other end of the spectrum of how not to do things. They need to do it because that's the way they operate and that's the space they're in. But from a independent retailer point of view, certainly in skincare, that's not the way we need to operate. But there are lots of, I think, opportunities to leverage today's technology better.
Interesting. If you were to say why that is, as a best guess, is that due to a lack of understanding? Is it due to a lack of time? Is it due to a lack of prioritisation? What would you, from your experience, maybe talk to other retailers who you feel are not doing it so well? Obviously, you have to name names, but
from my experience, I've seen retailers, and it's not just personalization as technology, but in general, they'll take a piece of technology, they'll implement it, and for the first 5 minutes they're all about that, but then they don't take care of that. They don't actually look at how that technology can grow with them as business. So as they're putting more and more things onto their site, or just changing their value proposition to the market in different ways, they're not then upscaling what they're doing with that piece of technology as well. And I think that is exactly what happens with this type of technology. People put it in, they'll put the bare minimum in, they'll put the you may also like bar underneath one product, and then expect miracles to happen. But it's not that type of technology. When it comes to segmenting in any piece of software, that's something that needs to be tended to. It's something you need to revisit and keep on looking at those segments. Are they still right? Are we using them the correct way? Do we have the technology on our site in the right way still? Things move so quickly in e-commerce that you can soon be behind the times.
And I think so the sort of shiny objects syndrome, of latest buzzword, latest trend, latest tool. Yeah. This software will be the thing that changes our business, I'm sure. And then, as you say, it gathers cobwebs and perhaps is then 10% of the potential value it could add.
With any piece of technology that you're going to put onto your website, if you do a default install, you're going to get default results. That's it. You're not going to get any more. Don't expect any more. Whereas what we do as a business, we push the technology. Obviously, we use Nosso as a partner, and we're constantly sort of tapping them on the shoulder, saying, could we just? And we have a great relationship with them in that way that we try and push the technology for our benefit as hard and as fast as we can. But again, because our expectations are super high on everything we do, so we need to push hard to make sure we meet them.
So just out of interest for people listening, I'm interested, so hopefully they will be. How do you manage that in your business? So if you're almost you're going deep and long on certain tools, does that mean you ultimately have to be more selective about which tools you're putting in? Like how do you balance that trade-off?
Oh, absolutely. As a team, we're very much we're very happy to try as many tools as we can, but obviously there's a limit, and we also need to be very selective, like I say, about what we pick up, because when we do use, say, a personalization tool or whatever it may be, we need to make sure we have the resource to invest into that to get the most out of it. Otherwise, we end up with all the toys and no one really paying attention to what they're doing, and the ROI running away. I think it's important to focus, and and that's going back to one of your earlier questions about what tips and so on. I think one of the things to really focus on, to wring every bit of value out of every bit of technology you have, because again, there's too many people out there who've done default implementations of things and not really getting the value. It's a shame, because it doesn't take that much effort really to look at what other people are doing, look at what the industry is doing, where things are moving, get some advice, use some consultants. It really doesn't either take that much time or cost that much money to then, double your return on some of these tools.
So you sort of operate, if I'm understanding correctly, a wide-scale test and learn approach, as it were, and then if you start to see, positive signs or good things starting to happen, you would then take that and really triple down on that tool, really, as you say, bring the value.
And some tools don't even get to that point. Some tools just from us, again, we talk to lots of people in the industry, lots of people in sort of the e-commerce sphere as a whole. We get as much intel as possible before even looking at implementation, or even maybe even starting a conversation with some people. We don't even go there.
Nice. So I think for people listening, one of the key takeaways there that Steve, I think, has shared, which is a really nice one and not, I don't think, talked about enough personally, is what have you already got running that you could do more with, rather than what are you going to go and buy and layer on top of to try and get that next percentage or that next average order value increase, or whatever it is you're working on at the moment. Are there things you've already invested in that are already running that, with a bit of help, support from people in the industry, from experts, whatever it is, that you could actually squeeze out, or maybe even just if you focus more on it and you made it an objective for your team to make that tool or that channel work harder? Is there more that you could do? Is it could become more personal? Okay, amazing. All right, so we're into the sort of the last segue now. So we're going to hit you up with our questions that we ask every single show. First things first then, what would you say are the main things people can do to completely kneecap, destroy and obliterate their results with personalisation? What's the worst thing they can do?
Oh, the worst thing, right.
Or the biggest mistakes you're seeing right now.
So one we've touched on, which is just doing the bare minimum.
Yeah.
I think that is just, but I think the opposite end of the spectrum of over-optimizing or over-restricting some of the recommendations and so on, that you can see that a lot as well. I think that certainly puts a bit of a damper on things. Again, sometimes when it comes to data, when it comes to AI, you've got to give it time, you've got to let it sort of build enough data and start making its own decisions and so on, as far as what can and can't be done. I think the other thing to mention there is also people not putting things in relevant places, people not thinking how their customers are interacting with their site. So two areas that we looked at early doors were things like the My Account page and the 404 page, which sounds a little bit out there, but the amount of people who may unintentionally hit a 404 page, we still know a lot of data about them. We know potentially they've been browsing the site for 20 minutes before, or even have some data from a previous session, and we'll be able to hopefully bring them back into the journey with relevant recommendations or relevant content, even if they've hit a 404. That's an absolute win. It's such low hanging fruit, and it's low numbers, but you potentially got someone who's going to bounce right out of your site, and you can just keep back in. My Account page, similar. They're there for a reason. If they're on a My Account page, they've been on your site before, certainly. They've probably bought from your site before if they're on My Account page. So again, we've got lots and lots of data at that point, so why not start pushing product or content at them at that point as well? Why leave it to all the other standard pages that you'd expect content and product on? Why not start leveraging content there?
Really nice. I love those two. I don't think I've ever heard those, so thank you. You're getting it all here on Everything E-commerce, everyone. This is the show where we reveal the secrets. Never have been revealed before. So I think the idea of, again, really what you're talking about there, right, is putting yourself in a customer's shoes and going, if I hit a 404, well, I don't want to be at 404. You as a retailer don't want to be at 404. Exactly. So why don't we do something constructive about it and use what we've got to try and get you back into the journey? Love that one. And the same in My Account. I don't think I've ever actually seen someone promote product, which is crazy when you think about it, or content on the My Account page. Other than, have you forgotten password? Here's what you need to do.
Exactly. And we obviously you need to keep some stuff in, but ultimately, that is the bit where we've got probably the most data on someone. So let's leverage it. Let's make it nice for them.
Why not? I love it. There are some great things. And so really, actually, Steve, what I love about that is you've taken what's the worst thing you can do, and given an amazing team.
There we go.
So there you go. Amazing. So I think we've kind of wringed a lot of value out of you today. So if you don't have a huge amount to add, you just want to recap, that's fine. But what are your top secrets and tips for personalisation? And maybe it's a summary of what you said, maybe it's a recap, or maybe you've got another little nugget up your sleeve, like the 404 like camp gems.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll give you another little nugget. That's not a problem at all. It's one that myself and a friend of mine repeat quite a lot. I think it's really valuable, and it's actually a quote from Jack Welch. So he talks about the quote is if the rate of change on the outside is faster than the rate of change on the inside, then the end is near. So what he's saying is if the market or technology is just moving way quicker than you are as a business, then forget it, you're doomed. And I absolutely think that's correct. And I think that's where this type of technology and technologies like it really need to be adopted and evolved by you as a user within your business, but to make sure you are keeping up with that rate of change, because e-commerce is very, very young. It's not an industry that's been around for very long at all. Certainly in our area of skincare, that's traveling at a huge rate as well. And if you don't keep up with those, then you'll find that you are very much on your back foot.
Love it. So if the pace of things on the outside is greater than the pace of things on the inside,
you got problems.
The end is near. Jack Welch. Okay, and who's Jack Welch, if anyone doesn't know?
He was the CEO of GE, I believe.
Ex-CEO, GE, yeah. But I'm writing that down. Pace change on outside, greater than pace change inside. Steve.
There we go. Another nugget.
You're bringing the value punches even here. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So with that being said, let's see if we can do three value bombs. Parting thought. What's one thing people listening can take away and put in practice today? And that could be a tactic, a strategy, or an idea.
I would probably start looking beyond technology. So I think today, if you're going to do anything, start having conversations with peers within your niche, your sector, your market, whatever it may be. Open up those conversations, or whether it just be so from an e-commerce point of view, just have as many conversations, build your networks up as much as you can. We spoke earlier about us making decisions and not even having conversations with technology providers based on the intel that we can get. That intel is all word of mouth. That is what's happening right now within technology, within e-commerce, whether that be platforms or technology providers within those platforms. The only way to keep up with that is by having conversations about what's happening right now. Before you know, the stuff you're reading online is out of date. It's all about what decisions people are making right now. So the one thing I think to do today would be to talk to more people and get as much intel as you can.
Okay, amazing. So start thinking about how can people listening build their networks, make sure they're tapped into other people in their industry, or maybe people in lookalike brands that aren't in the same markets, or experts, whatever it is, but who are they going to pick up the phone to when they need to figure out what's going to happen, and make sure that their pace of change is greater on the inside than on the outside.
Water background, very nice.
Steve, you've been amazing. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks very much.
Real pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.